Showtime. Let me see that. Hello? Are you okay? We are live.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, everyone. Olá, pessoal. Opa, peraí. Ixi, Peraí. Eu coloquei aqui. Pronto. Ok, agora. Hello, everyone. Olá, pessoal. Tudo bem com vocês? Bem-vindos ao nosso último AngularSP do ano. Conseguimos, gente, todos os meses do ano de 2020, esse ano tão maravilhoso, só que não. Conseguimos fazer eventos todos os meses com um monte de palestrantes, um monte de gente legal, um monte de gente bacana, compartilhando conhecimento, certo? E hoje, né, no dia 8, nós costumamos fazer o evento no final do mês, certo? Porém, dezembro, né? Dezembro tem as festas de fim de ano, mas cuidado com corona, não se aglomerem, por favor. Mas a gente não iria conseguir fazer no dia 25, dia 23 de dezembro. Então a gente fez hoje e a gente aproveitou, né, essa oportunidade, eu estava falando agora com o Gerard, que como a gente não consegue fazer eventos presenciais, a gente pode aproveitar a oportunidade para ter eventos com pessoas do mundo todo, certo? E hoje nós temos o grande Gerard Sanz, excelente palestrante, já palestrou na Brasil JS, já palestrou, e ele vai falar um pouquinho, né, inclusive em português, eu fico spoiler um pouquinho só, mas o que acontece? No começo do, acho que mês passado, em novembro, o Gerard fez um tweet muito interessante, colocando em gráficos as maiores comunidades Angulars do mundo. E a nossa AngularSP, nós somos a quinta maior do mundo. Com um pequeno detalhe, tá? Nós somos a quinta maior do mundo, só que entre nós e o terceiro lugar tem tipo umas 120 pessoas só. Então a gente está muito perto para ser a terceira maior do mundo. Isso é excelente. Só que eu aproveitei, ele fez, eu falei, obrigado, Jorge, muito bom esse Twitter, obrigado. Só que eu falei assim, opa, peraí, se ele já falou com a gente, eu vou aproveitar essa chance e falar, ô Gerard, você gostaria de participar do nosso último evento do ano, vai ser um evento especial e tudo mais, e ele aceitou, né? Ele está aqui. Só que tem um problema, né? Que ele está hoje na Inglaterra, certo? Terra abençoada, que agora o pessoal tá todo mundo se vacinando. Tá todo mundo lá O Gerard vai sair daqui e vai pro postinho lá, né? Tomar vacina. Vai pegar a filinha para tomar o postinho. Então, mas tudo bem, né? Daqui a pouco eu tô indo para lá também. Mas, enfim, ele tá na Inglaterra e lá o fuso horário é 3 horas, né? Que até me assustou pra caramba, porque. Não, ele me assustou, mas o fuso horário, então eu fiquei desesperado, coloquei alarme no meu celular, no Google, porque fuso horários me dão medo. Mas, enfim. Mas ele está aqui hoje, certo? Então, vamos lá, vamos começar a nossa palestra. Então, Gerard, please. Uma coisa importante: a palestra dele vai ser em inglês, tá? Aqui no YouTube tem tradução simultânea automática e tal, mas vai ficar aqui gravado, enfim, tal. Mas a palestra vai ser português, vai ser em inglês, só que ele tem uma surpresa. Gerard, you can present yourself.
Okay, so I'm familiar with Portuguese, and I want to tell you that you can write me in Portuguese, no problem. I can also speak Portuguese, but I haven't practiced for a while. last year I did my talk at Brazil JS in Portuguese, but I practice. For today I didn't practice, so I'm a little bit scared to use Portuguese. But if you want to use Portuguese, there's no problem at all.
So the same thing that when I did a talk at the Google Dev Latam,
Yes.
I tell them that I prefer to make my talk in English better than Spanish because I'd rather to butcher the English language than the Spanish language with my terrible Portuñol. So if I'm gonna talk wrongly, I prefer to talk wrongly in English
In
to
one
not.
language.
Yeah, because I didn't want to offend anyone at the event that was a Spanish event. So
Yeah, that's correct.
no further no further ado,
Yes,
let's begin
yes.
your talk. I'm gonna do got
Oops.
your okay. So you can take from him from here, and
Yes.
I will be here at the backstage. So good talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. No worries. No worries. So today I want to talk to you about creating a real-time chat PWA using GraphQL and Amplify Data Store. And yeah, there will be few things that may be new to you. There's quite a lot of topics. So we have PWA, we have GraphQL, we have Amplify, Data Store, real time. Maybe maybe it's gonna be difficult, but I'm gonna try to put a nice talk for you. So just a little bit of an intro before we go into the topic. So this is my name. I'm originally from Barcelona in Spain. Some people think that I'm English. I am not. And as I was saying before, I lived in Sao Paulo for 2 years. I lived in Moema, so you can feel free to ask me anything in Portuguese. I should be able to understand. So my name is Gerard Sanz, and I'm a developer advocate at Amazon Web Services. And you can see here some pictures with my cat. I'm a little bit crazy, so that's all right. I've been doing talks for the last 6 years. So I've been all over the place. As you can see, I've been also in Brazil, of course. And now I'm a little bit sad because I cannot travel anymore. But okay, as anyone else. So the first thing that I want you to think, if you are a web developer, maybe you haven't build any offline first app. So that will be my first question. And I want you to think about what is working offline for web. So what do you think is that offline first? Well, the first thing that I want you to understand is about this. Well, this is our friend when we go offline. This is using Chrome. So when you go offline and you see this page, if you press the space bar, you can play this game from this dinosaur escaping from these cactuses. You can try it in your browser. But of course, if you have an app that you want to use offline, a web app, that's not what you want to give to your users. You probably want to be able to use your app fully. So let's see how we can do that. So we are going to focus on offline first apps for web. Of course, you can also develop offline first with native apps. You could use Android or iOS, but I'm going to focus using web technologies. And the first thing we want to do is be able to avoid the dinosaur. We want to be offline ready. And that will be our first step. And we are going to be using a technology that it's called progressive web apps, and that will allow us to run your web app offline. The next thing that we want to be looking when building offline first app is providing a great user experience. And as I was showing before, now if you try your web app and you go offline, you are going to probably get the dinosaur. And that's not a great user experience. So we are going to be looking at different ways to improve that user experience when they are offline. And we are quite used to these kind of applications when we are using our mobile phone. And that comes new when we want to do the same using web. So we will be looking at how we can add native-like features, the same as you can find in your mobile, but now for web. And I'm going to be showing some of the steps to create these apps. And when you have your web app running offline, your first question probably will be, once you have avoid the dinosaur, is how are you going to deal with user data? And the next thing we are going to be looking at is how we can provide a reliable storage. So the user can store data, it can create new records, but probably the most important is that whenever they go online again, this data is going to be synchronized with your data source. So that's kind of the intro that I wanted to do. And as always, I'm going to be using these cats. And when you see a cat, that means that that's the end of the section. So you can take a mental break. And I want to congratulate you. This is the first stage of this talk. So that's a little bit of a funny moment. The next thing that I want to look at is progressive web apps. And as I was explaining, this is how we are going to make our web app work offline. So let's look into it. First thing I want to cover is what are the core requirements. So what makes a web app a PWA? The first thing that you want to include is security. And we are going to be looking at the assets, the JavaScript, and the assets for your single page application to work. And we want this single page application to be hosted using HTTPS. And this will give us the security that nobody has changed the content. And also it will give us the security for the user data. So that's the first requirement. The next requirement that we are going to be looking is the service worker. And that will give us the offline capability. So that's very important for PWAs. Finally, we will be looking at the web app manifest. And this is a feature that will allow your web app to work in different devices. So not only will your app be working on mobile, but it will also be working on desktop. And a whole range of different devices that were not available before. Probably one of the main features that we'll be looking at is that your app will be looking as a standalone application. So it will be looking like a native app for your user. Let's look at the service worker while it's offline. And this is a small diagram. So we have our single page application. This is the index HTML page on the left. We also have the network on the right, and we are offline. And in the middle, we have the service worker. And the service worker will be sitting between our single page app and the network. And if we go offline and we hit refresh, the index HTML page is going to make the request for your JavaScript code and also some assets. Here I'm pointing to the logo, which is a common asset. And the service worker will be looking at these requests. One thing that it will do is it will look into the cache and it will try to match the request with whatever is installed for that application. If there is a match, like in this example, it will send the assets back to the main page, which is the index HTML page. So now we have our single page application working as if it's online. And if you have noticed, we are offline at this time. So that's quite a new feature that probably you were not expecting. So the service worker will allow you to basically work offline. And the only thing that it will require is that you pre-install some assets. So we will look at how to do that with Angular, but that's for now the intro that I wanted to cover. And usually this is the reaction from web developers. If you haven't seen this PWA technology before, you can be surprised. A lot of the websites, modern websites, they use this technology, like the Angular website, giving you access to the documentation while you are offline. So you can try that if you like. One thing that I want to cover next is AWS Amplify. And before I go into more details, I want to cover the concept of full stack serverless. And usually when we talk about serverless, we think about the backend and using cloud services. But what Amplify allows you is to provide this full stack idea. So we are integrating front end and back end in one tool. AWS Amplify supports all of these web and mobile frameworks. So we have React, Angular, Vue, JavaScript, and also Next.js. And on the mobile side, we have React Native, Ionic, Android, iOS, and also Flutter on preview. When we look at AWS Amplify, there are different pieces that come together, and you can decide to use them independently as well. So the first is the framework, the Amplify framework. So this is a set of libraries that you can use to build your full stack serverless apps. There's also developer tools that will facilitate building your apps without having to go into the configuration of every separate feature. So that will help you to do rapid development. There's also cloud services, and for Amplify, these will be AWS services, and then there will be the Amplify CLI. As Angular developers, we are familiar with the Angular CLI, so this will be very close to the same experience as you are used to. So let's talk a little bit about the Amplify framework. This is an open source, so these are a set of libraries that you can contribute and participate. There's the idea of a category. So each of these libraries will implement different APIs depending on the category that we are using. This is opinionated, and it's familiar for Angular developers to have opinions, and Angular is a opinionated framework. So this means that if you are a familiar AWS developer, you will be able to see how the Amplify core team has decided to set up the different features. And usually this will be using best practices and doing the initial setup for you. If you don't agree or you need further configuration, you also have escape hatches that you can use. So there's plenty of flexibility. Let's look into developer tools. And one of them is the Amplify CLI. So this is how, via terminal commands, we will be doing different actions, and they will provide us all of the features that we need to set up our application. These tools will allow us to create and manage AWS services, so you don't have to learn about each independent AWS service on your own. This will be done by the Amplify CLI, and this is very familiar with other CLIs. So it will create and provision the services that you need for independent features. It also supports multiple environments, so you can reproduce the environments that you use with your team. So these are usually development environment, staging, Q&A, and production. So you can replicate those environments using the Amplify CLI as well. There's also an option to test locally and use mock for the different AWS services. So I would recommend you to look into those so you can speed up your development cycle. The community is using also a plugin ecosystem, and there's few of these plugins that you can use today. One of them is the video plugin, the docs, and the TTL. So this is just an overview of the developer tools that you have available. Let's look now at how the Amplify CLI works while you are developing an app. So the first thing that you will be using is Amplify init, and this will set up the project, which will be an Angular CLI project, and you will be able to connect that project with your AWS account. So that will happen while you run Amplify init. The next thing that you will do next is add a new feature, what we call a category. And this could be, for example, to add authentication. Maybe you want to add a REST API or maybe GraphQL. So these are different categories that you can add to your application. The next thing is create and provision these local resources in the cloud. So that will be Amplify push. And at any time, if you want to change the settings that you set up for your app, you can come back to the terminal and run amplify update with the name of the category. So these are the main commands that you can use, just to give you an overview. Another service that you have available is the AWS Amplify console. And this is a way to auto-deploy for each commit. So you can control when you redeploy your app. This is very useful, and it provides this seamless CDCI. And a lot of features come here. So there's a deploy that can reach globally. And you can also use custom domains and access them from the console. You can also use branch-based deployments. These are all atomic, and you can also secure them if you want to give specific access, for example, for QA or test. Or if you want to deploy and you have a specific branch that you want to release for a single user, you can protect that with a password. Amplify supports many providers, so we have GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, Code Commit, and you can use any of those. And there's also an option to use a manual deploy. So there's plenty of things that you can use, and this comes as a modern tool set. Let's look into the categories. So I'm going to show you some of the common building blocks. And we have here the authentication, we have the APIs with REST and GraphQL, interactions, which are the chatbots, analytics, extended reality. And these are some of them. We also have a storage, support for functions, of course, hosting, so you can deploy your application, and also notifications. We haven't talked about artificial intelligence and machine learning, so I also want to add these few options here. So you can use translations, you can also use text to speech, so you can read out loud text. You can do also the opposite, so you can give voice commands and trigger actions in your app. You can also look into images and video and recognize shapes and objects, and also use comprehend to find text from images, and also other metadata. So there's plenty of things here. Usually when I do this, these are the ones that we are going to use in our real-time chat PWA app. And this is usually the reaction from people. We are not going to cover all of those categories, but this is just to show you the potential of AWS Amplify. So yeah, that's another cat, of course. So this is the app. If you want to build the app, you can follow this tutorial. And this is a way to learn how to use Amplify and build following this step procedure. So that's going to be our real-time chatty app. And this is how it looks. So here we can see a single room chat app. There's a couple of users. You have G-Sans, myself on the left. We have a robot. I mean, that's just another user. It's not using artificial intelligence. But you can send messages between the users. They will show in this room. And if it gets too noisy, you can also remove the messages. So this is the basic real-time chat application we will be working on, and this is a general design. First is the hosting. So as I was explaining, AWS Amplify console will provide you with this automatic deploy, and we will host all the assets, including HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc. So every time that you do a commit, it will be redeploying all of the build and the different assets, so they can be hosted on a HTTPS domain. The next thing I will look into is how the authenticate works. So every user will be able to log in and sign up, and this is going to be handled by Amazon Cognito. So now we have the hosting, we have covered the login of the users. The next thing is going to be how we manage our data. And we are going to be using GraphQL. And there's a service, which is a GraphQL manage API, which is AppSync. And that's going to give us access to a document database, which is Amazon DynamoDB. So that's the overall architecture. And let me show you how you can build it. And it's going to be just by using these commands that you can get that architecture. And this works similarly to the Angular CLI. So we have Amplify init that will connect with your AWS account. Then we will add authentication, creating the Amazon Cognito resources for you. And the next thing we will do is run Amplify Add API. For this app, it's going to be using GraphQL, so we can use subscriptions to provide the real-time features. And then you can just run Amplify Push, and it will create all of these services so you can start using them very easily. These commands, they will ask you for the specific configuration, but here I'm just showing you the commands, not the prompts that come with them. All right. So one thing when working with GraphQL is defining your GraphQL schema. And this is how we are going to access our data source from our client. Here we have a type, which is the message that we share in our chat app. And besides the type, I'm using this add model. We call this a GraphQL transform, and this has been built by the Amplify core team. So it will create the resolvers and also the table that it's associated with this type, so you can run all the CRUD operations. So you can create, you can update, delete new messages, and probably most importantly, set up the subscription so you can use real time. On this type, we have few fields. So we have the ID, the user, the message, and also the timestamp. So we can show all the messages on the timeline. And we can see that the types are some of the GraphQL types, but we have some extra types that you can use that they have been created by the Amplify team. This one is the AWS datetime, and that will give us this timestamp. Maybe you notice that the last field has no exclamation point. So that's telling you that this is an optional field. So all of the other fields are mandatory, but the last one. Okay, so the way we are going to provide the offline capabilities is by using Amplify Data Store. And Amplify Data Store will use the GraphQL schema to generate the models that our client is going to be using. And this is the Data Store API. The Data Store API has the query, save, and also delete, and the real-time features with a subscription. That will be using the storage engine behind the scenes, and depending on the device, it's going to be using IndexedDB or SQLite. For our demo, I'm going to be showing IndexedDB, which is you using the browser. When we go online, we're going to be using GraphQL and the sync engine to do all of the synchronization with our data source. And this is going to be using AppSync. AppSync is by default using DynamoDB, but you can also connect AWS Lambda and Elasticsearch. So this is an overview of how Amplify Data Store is going to allow you to use your app offline and online, and I'm going to demonstrate this at the end of the talk. The way we create messages is by using the models. These models can be generated using Amplify CLI, and then you can just import the type in your client code. Here you can see that we can create a new message by using data store save, and it's a simple object that we can set up with all the details. So here I'm using the user that is currently logged in, my message, and also the timestamp. As you can see here, we are not using GraphQL. So this is quite an interesting approach. So your developers in your team, they don't need to be GraphQL experts. They just need to be familiar with the model, which is using simple JavaScript objects. If we want to query data, we can use the data store, also again with the model, which in this case is chatty. And we are introducing a new concept, which is the predicates. And the predicates will allow us to run queries on the local browser. And this query is just getting all of the records stored locally. So that's going to give back an array of messages that we can display. All right, so we have done quite a lot. I think we are in a good shape to do a little demo. So let me go and show you a little demo. And this is just one client. So I just log in with my user. I'm gonna say something. Hi everyone. All right, so let's share this message. So you can see here what's the behavior. Let me just quickly go offline so we can see. Let me change that. So I'm gonna go to the developer tools and go offline. And one thing that I want to show you is that we get the dinosaur. And let me see if I can play the game. Okay, yeah, it's working. But yeah, this is not what we want. I mean, that's just a little demo showing what we got so far. And the next thing I want to do is make it a PWA. So I've shown you how we are gonna be storing the messages using IndexedDB and Amplify Data Store, but we still need to solve the dinosaur and some other issues that we are gonna solve with PWA. So let's see how we can do that with Angular. We are very lucky because we have a plugin that will do most of the work for us. And we can run this plugin using ng at Angular/PWA. And let me show you some of the changes here. So we can see that there's a ng-sw config. So that's a new file that was created. We can also see that some icons are created. These are to support the different devices. So we will be seeing these icons when we install the app in mobile and desktop. There's also the web app manifest, a configuration that will change the build for Angular, and also the resources from the index.html page and the app module. So let's look into these changes a little bit closer. On the index.html page, we can see that we have included the web app manifest, and we already have some theming. This theming will be applied on different devices, so you can change this to change the user experience. One thing that we will need as well is to make sure that the client is using JavaScript, and this is because we are going to be running the service worker. So that's some of the changes. Another change that we will be seeing is in the app module, and we need to include the service worker. So this will be using the service worker module, and it will only work when we do the production build. So this is something to take into account. If you don't build for production, the service worker won't be available. So that can be a little bit confusing. So make sure that you run the production build so the service worker will be available for you. So If we run the production build, we are going to get a series of new assets on our this folder, and these are unique from this PWA plugin. So we can see the index.html page, of course, we can see the web app manifest, but we can also see a series of files that are going to change how the service worker is applied. So there's a configuration file using a JSON, and then we have the service worker, which is the NGSW worker JavaScript file. And there's also the safety worker that will avoid some of the issues that were found initially when using PWAs, that in some cases you couldn't upgrade to new versions, and people in the past have had to ask the users to manually uninstall the service worker. Of course, when you are deploying or you are rolling out a big application to thousands of users, that's something that you don't want to do. You don't want to ask 1,000 of users to uninstall a service worker just because you want to change the version. So this safety worker will avoid that situation, and it's already included with the PWA plugin. All right. One thing that I want to show you is how you can test this locally, so you don't have to redeploy every time that you introduce a change. So if you want to test your service worker locally, of course, you need to build for production, but you also can use a HTTP server using the this folder. So that configuration here will open a new browser, and you will be able to test the service worker locally. All right. So one of the things that I noticed when I ran this is that the logo wasn't working. And if you can notice here at the top, that's how it looked when I ran the PWA plugin and use that version of the code. So one thing that I had to do is change the configuration for the service worker. A way that we can change the configuration is by looking at the ngsw config JSON file, and over here we will find what is called asset groups. So the index is the entry point. If you have a different entry point, you can change it, but it's going to be always index HTML for Angular apps. And then for asset groups, we have the app assets and also what is called the assets group. So here we have these two entries. I'm going to be changing the app asset group. And one of the configurations is the install mode. And the prefetch is when we install our service worker, which is the first time that we load our web app. It's going to install all of the resources in this group. And we can see that there's prefetch and lazy. For this app group, we are going to use prefetch. So that's going to be during the installation of our service worker. The sources, the resources that we are going to be using is the index.html page, the web app manifest, any assets, the code. These are going to be included by default, so you don't have to worry. And the problem that we had with the logo is that it was an external resource. So I'm going to include that as a URL. Anything else was added automatically by the PWA plugin. Another solution here would be to copy this asset and put it on the public folder. So it will become part of the dist folder. Because this is an external resource, it needs to be handled by this URLs array. This can also apply, for example, for Google Fonts. All right, so let's look into the other group, which is the assets group. And this group is slightly different. And this group is using lazy install mode, and for update mode is using prefetch. So let's explain how this changes. These are mainly assets for different devices. So let's imagine we are using an Android phone. For Android, we are going to be using lazy when we install the service worker, and that will be looking at the assets folder and all of these extensions. So we have all of the images that are only available for Android. What we are doing by using lazy install mode is that we are not going to be loading, for example, iOS assets, or we are not going to be loading Microsoft operative system assets. So that's going to save us some space. When we do an update, because we already install these assets for example, Android, we don't need to install lazy load these assets again. We can just replace them. So that's why we do prefetch when we do update. Okay, so now you are a little bit more familiar with the configuration. We have that sorted. So we have a PWA app now. So let me quickly go to another little demo. And for this demo, I'm gonna be using two different users. This one seems to be not up to date. And here I have GSANS and I have a robot. One thing that I want to try is using another device. And here I have the same application but installed in my phone. So you can see here the application is loading. It's using Amplify data store. And I'm going to say, I'm going to create a message here. And because I'm using the phone, I can also use emojis. So let me very quickly use an emoji, and you will see that how it synchronizes across the devices. So here I just created the message. You can see that it's synchronizing with all of the devices. One thing I want to show you is how this data is being stored. So I will go to the developer tools and show you that. And one thing that I want to do is go to the developer tools and pick the application. And here I'm going to be looking at the different sections. The first one is the app manifest. And these are the configuration for our PWA application. So these are some settings that will be used for different devices. We are using the standalone option. So that will give us that feeling of a standalone app as I use on my phone. There's also the icons. I'm using the Angular icon. You could change that. There's also the service worker. We can see when it was installed. We can see what's the status. We can try some of these APIs that you can test from the developer tools. And another interesting thing is that I can choose some of these options. For example, offline will behave as if I change the network. So that's also another option. One thing that I want to show you is how the information is being stored. So that's how the indexed DB is keeping the data from our user. And here I have different entries. I want to go to the user chatty, and that's our type. And here I can see the different entries. So one thing I want to show you is the messages. So this is how the messages are being stored locally. And the other thing I want to show you is the internal fields. And these internal fields will allow me to synchronize the messages while I'm online. So let's do a little example. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a simple sequence. These are now offline. So I want to go offline. And I'm going to be sending a series of numbers. So I'm going to create a message here, and over here I'm going to send another message. That's 2. Then here is 3. So this client is online, this client is offline, and the final message is going to be 4. So here, if I go online again, I want to see the data synchronized. And this is the best user experience. I'm not asking the user to synchronize. The user may be on the underground. It's coming out of the underground. So I'm going online. And you can see how the messages have synchronized, and not only on the offline client, which was using the robot, but also here for the other user. This will be synchronizing across all of the users. So if we have 1,000 users, all of the clients will be synchronized. So let's see what happened there. And in order to see it, we need to go to the network and look at the different requests here. So I'm going to do that. And here I can see there's a GraphQL, and this is using WebSockets, and I can see the messages here. And if I can open it, you will see that the different messages were exchanged. So we can see here the last message, which is the 4, the message 4, but I can also see the other messages, like, for example, the previous message that was number 3. Well, in this case, it's number 2 because it's the second message from the robot. Okay, so that's how GraphQL was able to synchronize when we went back online. All right, so that's one part of the demo. Okay, so the other thing that I want to show you at this point is how we can benefit from the changes. And one thing that the Chatty app, now that it's PWA, is few things. So one thing is that now we can not only run the application on the browser, we can also run it on the desktop and in mobile. So we have a completely new set of devices that we can run these two. The feature that we are going to be using to do that is the add to home screen. And this is how it looks. On the left is Android phone, and on the right is iPhone. And I'm going to be showing you how that looks. So it looks very similar to the web version, but it looks as a separate app. So far, we have 99 offline ready. We have we can survive offline reload. So let's see that. I haven't tried that actually. So if I go offline, I can hit reload. So let me show. I can reload the page and it will reload. So we have that. We can also store the messages while we are offline. We have also did the demo for that. We can also go back online and the messages will be shared using GraphQL subscriptions and WebSockets. But there's one thing that I show you, and I want to show you how I implemented that. And is when I go offline, we need to show the user that the connectivity has changed. So if we fix that, we will get the best experience for the user. So how I did that was using offline flag. You can see here, the way I'm using it is by using ng-class and ng-if. So I can change the styles and I can also change the message that is displayed. And that's going to be initialized to false. And I'm just going to be listening to the hub. This is implemented by Amplify, and I can listen to any of the data store events. In this case, I'm using the network status, and I'm seeing if the active flag is changing. In any case, if I receive a message from the network status, I'm going to update my offline flag and change the UI accordingly. So that's going to be looking like this. We have seen that on the demo. I'm changing the input and also the chat room message at the top. So it's telling the user whenever it's going offline, the user will be able to see that and maybe decide not to share messages. So this is a little improvement to achieve these offline first principles that we introduced at the beginning. All right, so this is an overview what are the differences between web and PWA? As you have seen, we have a faster PWA because we have some assets pre-catch. This is working offline and online. Once you install your app, which is a PWA, it will pre-catch that on the browser. So that's going to be loading faster. As we have seen, there's also offline capabilities. We have full screen apps on mobile and also desktop. And besides the browser. So that's also giving us these native-like features. So I'm going to rate PWA slightly better. And this is mostly the end of the talk. I mean, I show this cat as showing you all the possibilities. I hope I was able to introduce you to PWA and how this real-time chat app benefited from it. And if you want, I will give you this action to try it. So you can go ahead and you can follow a couple of repos. This is the final solution. So you can see how it was built. There's nothing more than the chat app. So it should be clear from this code. And also a workshop that you can follow step by step. So that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have now at this point.
George, can you please put on the commentary here in YouTube the links for your talk and for your
Sure.
the people can go and study more. So great talk.
Thank you.
Excellent. I think was excellent idea to invite you to our final event of the year. So
Thanks.
thank you very much. It was a great talk, very interesting one. I didn't know about the Amplify project at Amazon.
Okay.
I don't know. It's my impression or no. It's not very well marketed by the AWS. Not for you, of course. You're doing your job, but we always we're hearing about serverless and
Yes, yes, of
but
course.
this Amplify uh, uh, facilitates a lot of things. So it's work in the serverless in the put abstraction uh, up above the
Yes.
serverless layer. So it's a very interesting product. And
Yeah, it's quite new. It's quite new because it's working as you were explaining. It's working in this full stack serverless. So usually serverless will be just the backend.
Yes.
But when you add the front end, then you get what we call. I mean, this is a new concept as well.
Yes.
It's full stack serverless. So you
Yes.
can use the cloud, and you have a lot of tools, and you have the CLI, and you can build all of these without leaving your terminal. So this is quite an interesting approach. And the thing is, we have seen the evolution, from monolith to microservices and then cloud. And what happens is a lot of the people is still a monolith. And for front-end developers, you need to jump like two different stages, like microservices and then cloud. So it's still not known from the vast majority. And Amplify has been around for 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years. So it's improving, but it's giving you a lot of features already.
Yes, and as you said, you give a very good idea. I'm gonna talk to Eric because his thing is the back end. He's terrible at the front end, and myself is the contrary. I don't. I like the back end more than him like the front end. He hates the front end. Absolutely hate. But I'm working on front end. I'm working on I'm gonna after that I'm gonna send you. I'm working in open source design system here at TOTUS, and but you give a good idea. I think I'm gonna talk to Eric to do some kind of
Yes,
mashup.
yes,
You do
yes,
the back end, I do the front end, and use full stack. I like that. I like that name, full stack serverless. Oh, it's a
yes, yes.
mouthful.
It's a good like short term,
Yes.
because everybody understands full stack.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are thinking, usually when people are talking full stack, they think Node. Okay, I'm using Node, and then
Mm-hmm.
I have some hosting. But the problem with that architecture, which will be like the monolith, is
Mm-hmm.
that when it grows, it doesn't scale that well.
Yes.
So then the solution for that problem
Mm-hmm.
is, the microservices first, which
Mm-hmm.
will be taking, some of the node features, and splitting them in like building blocks. But then the next thing that you can do is use functions, what is called cloud functions, and
Mm-hmm.
that will be more taking advantage of the cloud. But the good thing is that you don't have to go through these steps. You can go right to the to the end,
Yes.
which is the latest approach, which is serverless. And then
Of course.
the good thing is, if you use Amplify, you can try a few of the examples, see if you like it, and get something working, as I was showing the chatty
Mm-hmm.
app. It's not difficult, and then see if you can use it in some of your projects.
Of course. I'm gonna start. I'm gonna take this project and gonna start that in 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 full detail because I think that's very interesting. One thing that I heard I saw in I think Firebase channel. No, not
Yes,
Firebase.
yes.
I think it's Fireship channel.
Okay,
It's not from Firebase Google. It's a channel of a developer called Fireship
okay.
channel. It's a very good
Fireship.
Fireship. A very good. He did short videos like serverless in 100 seconds
Okay.
and try to summarize very well. And he's talking about some tendency of next years and of the next years that probably technology development and especially servers and this kind of infrastructure, you're gonna be
Yes,
just like electric bills, electric energy. So you only will plug your application and it's working. You not need to you don't need to be worried about the all the kinds of things that it needs to the energy sent to your home. You don't need you only plug your gadgets and it's working. And in the
that's
future it's
correct.
gonna be just like that. You only plug your application and it's just working. No need to worry about nowadays we worry about a lot about the Docker, the image, the Kubernetes, but this the evolution of that is that I'm only gonna be worried about my business logic. So all this kind
Yes,
of well,
yes.
where is it, the scale and this kind of things gonna be transparent to me. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's very.
that's serverless. But this
Mhm,
is this is serverless
mhm.
from from the front end,
Yes, 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 yes. So very
which is
interesting.
which is uh, which is which is cool, because
Yes.
before, the usual practice would be to have two separate teams. You have a front end, and then you have back end,
Hmm.
and then you will have to communicate these two teams. What happens now is that you don't need as much formality. You can use tools like the Amplify CLI, and this will create all of the necessary pieces in the backend. I mean, you cannot forget about the backend. You still
Yes.
need to know how
You need a
how is
database.
how is this working, but you
Yes.
don't need to be an expert,
Hmm.
which is fantastic. Because before, you would have, I was showing that on my slides, you will have to go and set up Amazon Cognito, you will have to set up the deployment, you will have to set up all of these different pieces are
Hmm.
separate. But now you run a command, which is the same as Angular CLI. No,
Yes,
Angular CLI will do the same for testing, for end-to-end testing.
building.
You don't need to prepare that.
Mm-hmm.
It's done by the Angular team or the
Mm-hmm.
Angular CLI team. This is very very similar. The Amplify team has put together, all of these default configurations that will give you that, easy start. Later on, you will have to learn more, but you can do the initial setup very fast.
Yeah, and
That's the
you can bring your idea to the real world very quickly and
that's
very
it.
safely too. Because when you set up this, I'm a very strong I'm very strong at defender of Angular CLI.
Yes, yes,
Because in my courses, in my talks, I all do. You're gonna create a new component, ng g c, the components, because but I can just create a new file. But the Angular
yeah, yeah,
team
yeah, yeah. It's
always
a
prepared all.
discipline.
Yes, yes. So it's very interesting. So we have some questions here. So João Paulo Avila, I'm gonna do put
Yes, yes,
so I think you'd understand. Yeah, and you can answer in English, of course.
yeah. Okay. So
At,
the question is, in iOS and Android, is possible validate
yes,
if a service
already.
worker is installed,
Yes.
and this is part of the PWA stack.
Hmm.
So actually, the way it works is, this is coming from the PWA plugin, and what it will do is it will add a hash. So it will detect if you, for example, have changed a CSS file. Every build will come with a different hash. So then the PWA will detect that you have done an update. And depending on the configuration, of course, you can change the configuration. You can decide, for example, some PWAs prefer to ask the user. And I think that's how the Angular website is set up. So it will show you like a small, the application has an update. You can reload. And the moment you reload, it will then replace the service worker and do another install with all the different assets and configuration. And this is exactly the same regardless iOS, Android. This is part of the web service cycle. So then the web service will detect changes. Then if you want, you can ask the user. You can show like a little warning. There's a new version. Maybe you want to update, maybe you want to wait, but the default setup is it will upgrade immediately. So it will just detect that there's a new version, and it will just replace all of the assets for you. You can change that. But that's the default.
Okay, thanks. Great question. Another one from João Paulo. Thanks for your questions. Is it possible to put a PWA in an App Store or Google Play? Oh, App Store, App Stores.
Yes, yes, yes. You can install. You can use this. There's different places where you can automate this, and they will package your PWA in a way that follows the different requirements. So you can do that. I haven't published any PWA, but you can find, for example, like popular PWAs like New York Times, and you can find them. There's also a PWA for Twitter, which I
Therefore,
believe is Twitter Lite. I mean, there's different examples that you can see how they did it. But yeah, you can do that. I mean, it's in the middle. No, it's not a native app.
mhm.
It's not a web app. It's a PWA. It's something
The
it's
middle,
something in the middle.
yes. Very interesting. And I think Microsoft do a update at Windows that can run PWAs natively on the desktop. I think it was very,
Yes. I mean,
very
PWA is changing.
mhm.
So iOS support, I think it's quite recent. But yeah, there's support already for different platforms, and yeah, desktop is quite interesting because I can also install my chatty app on iOS and Mac, and it just works.
So great. So I think we did the time. I think more or less 1 hour.
Yes,
So great talk, really great talk.
thank
Because of
you.
the time, I think not so much people attend. Everyone who attend, thank you. But this talk is gonna be online at YouTube, so I think it's gonna be I think a long tail thing.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
but thank you very much for your time. Thank you for very much for your effort of about this talk. It's gonna be this again, this is a great way to end this year. That was great to Angular SP, but
Yes.
terrible to around the world. But at our little universe at here at Angular SP was a good year. We did events every month
Okay,
of the
okay.
year. So and now we are the fifth.
Yeah. You just need few
Yeah.
hundred more members, and
So
maybe
here
you can be at the top.
everyone who is seeing this talk here at YouTube and don't know about Angular Meetup, here is our link. So please be a member. It's free. It's only need to have an account at Meetup. That is free. And let's be the biggest Angular community in the world. So thank you very much, George. Thank you very much for your time. And for you
My
guys,
pleasure.
we see next year to 2021, and we're gonna continue to make an event every month of the year from now and until the eternity. We work, uh, in Portuguese we say o bonde não vai parar.
Very good, very good.
So thank you very much. Thank you all. Bye bye.
Ciao.